I will start off with the prayer, usual prayer for teacher and student. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Viddhishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy and vigor. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So prior to recording, there was one question. And there's another question also from a previous discussion with the previous devotee, with another devotee. And that is the question of expectation and disappointment in dealing with others. And I hope that I've got that summarized correctly. And I suppose my counter question is, what is the effect on you when that happens? So maybe you can tell me that.
Maybe in that instant, disappointment.
What does that feel like?
It feels like perhaps there's a weight. It feels, I mean, I wouldn't use the word, a feeling of disappointment, a feeling of lack.
Okay.
Of
So I get it. So my next question then will be, if they had enacted what you had suggested, let's say in an example, then who would have been the beneficiary?
Both parties.
Okay. Okay. So I would say, let's say it's 50-50, then at least 50% of your feeling would be to do with the lack of benefit to yourself. And so immediately you can see the effect. This is an egoistic position. Your ego has been bruised, in other words. And it might come in the form of various scripts that you have. Such as they should listen to me a bit more. I feel a little humiliated that they've sidelined me and are not paying attention to what I have to say. And if only they had, and so it goes on. Would that be correct?
Yes.
So it's no secret that this is caused by yourself. Now, that's the one side of the equation. That's, let's say, the 50%. What about the other 50%? That there is a genuine concern that the other person might benefit from it and that they're not. So there's a certain flavor of altruism in it. It's not all about egoism. There is a concern for the other also. And of course, that's good, but it might be a wrong reading of the reality in front of you. And this reality we have to deal with. We have to deal with. We have to convince ourselves, really, that people and places and events are only present to us for a very short period of time. And that means we have to resort to a philosophy. Supposing somebody loses faith. Supposing they lose faith in their practice, supposing they lose faith in their tradition, supposing they lose faith in the divine, supposing they lose faith in their chosen ideal, and so on, we can see that it's an echo of the effect of that, which is seen with Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, because he's in a state of depression. And the result of losing faith will be depression. And disappointment is not exactly the hollow of depression, but it carries with it the same flavor. So both have to be remedied by faith. What do we mean by faith? By faith, we mean that there is sufficient reason for us to believe in something. And when that sufficient reason becomes absolutely unwavering conviction, then that really is entrenched faith. And that faith will not go easily. So faith is a delicate thing because if it's not well entrenched, it can waver. And ultimately, it can float away. How to reestablish it? We have to resort to philosophy. Now, that sounds a bit like an intellectual dry answer, because most people think of philosophy as, okay, these are principles, but really, I'm out of touch with them. These are abstract. I want something to practice. And that's fair enough. But you see, if you don't have the principles well entrenched, then the practice doesn't follow. There's a great example of this. There's a very important work on the tantric system by Sir John Woodruff, who was a High Court judge in I think it was the 18th century in India. And he had taken the trouble to try to study the 64 tantras, the agamas as they call it also, under a teacher, learn Sanskrit, and try to get inside Indian philosophy. The practical portion of that, in his book, which he puts as the serpent power because what we call our coiled up potential is divine potential and can carry with it an element of misunderstanding and wrong teaching. So he spends a whole preface, a whole foreword, a whole introduction, mammoth introduction to his subject on the subject of Kundalini, the serpent power as he calls it, the tantric system, by highlighting the misunderstandings and misinterpretations of the New Age people of his day, namely the Theosophical Society. Theosophical Society took the trouble to try to understand the Indian systems, adopting Sanskrit terms and certain concepts, but also bypassing the ancient commentaries and the original texts and putting in their own interpretations based on what they said was their own experiences. And so very carefully, he points out, this is what they say, this is what the scriptures say, and to understand what the scriptures say, you have to understand the philosophy. So let's put it in a way that we can all understand. We live in a world of circumstances where we are obliged to sit on one side of the fence, as it were, and be a recipient of whatever comes to us, namely events, scenes, people, all kinds of places, varying events, things constructed from change, things that seem to challenge us, problems. And at the same time, we have certain directional goals, certain objectives that we want to achieve. Naturally, as soon as you use that language, you're framing this from an individual point of view. You're asserting a certain individuality. For practical purposes, it's okay. But philosophy should be so entrenched in us with its principles that we should always have at the back of our mind the comparison of how does the relative relate to the absolute principles. So what are these principles? They're very fundamental, they're very easy, and yet they are not compatible with our experience directly. Indirectly, yes, but directly, no. We have to get used to reorientating our point of view. So whatever it is, whether it's a person, we have to have a penetrating vision which is scripture-based. A penetrating vision which says that we can categorize things into matter, life, and mind, and these are all objects. And on the other side is a subject that is noticing these things, and scripture has varying terms for it. Let us discover what these varying terms are and how they are described. The only thing that is in the subject category will be pure being. And we can also say, if this being, which infers a constant existence, then it has to also be conscious. There has to be an awareness, a consciousness behind it. Otherwise, we can't register anything. So straight away, we have an existent being that is also a witness. And that is a knower and ultimately a thinker. And that's your true nature. Conventional understanding of it says, no, I'm an individual. I was born on such and such a day, and I'm going through this experience. My life is traumatic, and sometimes I have some joy, and I used to have faith, and the faith is gone. And I used to be able to advise people, and some of them would listen. Unfortunately, many of them don't. What a pity, what a pity. And I feel humiliated about it, and so on. You'll see that this is a script that is going on, a conversation with yourself. And there's only one conversationist and one listener, and that's you. And so we have to observe the stream of thought which is going through, catch it, understand it's not in our favor, and make a psychological turn by reevaluating what we have in front of us, and then reasserting our own divinity and true nature and that of others. Now, this is not my technique. And we have to come to one of the most profound scriptures, and that is the Bhagavad Gita, where Sri Krishna is using this technique. He is straight away asserting there's no point in being weak. There's no point in lacking courage. There's no point in commiserating about the past or anticipating the future. Right here, right now, there's a reality that you are out of touch with, you've forgotten about, you're estranged from, you feel estranged from. Your nature is full and free and perfect, and yet, how is it that we feel bound and miserable? And so we have to revalue things on the basis that the thing that is bringing our sense of distress or a sense of misery or disturbance, all of that is not solving any difficulty, and because of that will be likely to arise again repeatedly, unless we learn a different way of thinking. Now, the advantage of the Vedanta philosophy is it gives us multiple choices. It tells us, if you like, you can think in this way. If you like, you can shift and think in another way. And this falls into three categories. First category will say that I'm an individual, and we have to add an enrichment to it, and that I need to be saved in a certain circumstance, and I need to appeal to a chosen ideal or a chosen deity or a divinity or an Ishtadevata is a technical term for it. But what is that? It is the one source, the one supreme spirit, which is worshipped, and that worshipped aspect we call God or divinity or our chosen ideal. We can personalize it: father, mother, companion, friend, sister, brother, or master, something like that, setting up a formal relationship there with that. And when that relationship goes, it is only because other things have taken over. These other things would be normally our response to these other circumstances. How do we respond to that circumstance? So let me take your example. You gave somebody some advice, let us say, and they chose to ignore it. And perhaps that advice was sound, but on their side, they're not the beneficiary of it. And you are not the beneficiary in your position of advisor. So from your point of view, stop being the advisor. That's a simple solution. But I want to advise somebody and help somebody. All right, do we all need somebody's help? Does your vision go only as far as a psychophysical entity in front of you? Or can you see deeper than that, deeper beyond mind, matter, and life, and get to the source, that blissful base, as I like to describe it, that infinite invisible, without which there's neither matter, nor mind, nor life. And it's not that mind and matter and life are separate from it. This is a second position. Because mind and matter and life are intrinsically part and parcel of it. There's only one supreme consciousness, which can be described as existence itself, consciousness itself, and bliss. And it has no mind. It has no arms, no legs, no features, no qualities. We can't imagine such a thing, and we sometimes can make a mistake. Well, a stone has no mind, it has no arms, no legs, and it doesn't seem to have any useful qualities that we know of, unless we chip away at it and make a carving from it. But it's an inert thing, an insentient thing. So we could make the mistake of saying, well, if you take away all these features, you don't have anything substantial. No, on the contrary, you have this description. You have existence itself, pure being. You have pure consciousness, and you have pure bliss. And your own nature is that, and that conviction has to be there. It has to be asserted continuously. And that's the option that Vedanta brings. It says, you can ask for help from a deity. And if you have faith in that deity, no doubt, you might get it. You might not also, because if you have a kind of faith that also inserts a doubt with it, you probably won't get anything. Faith means, I have faith, I ask for it, and I am absolutely sure I'll get it. I don't have to think about it again. That would be the position of petitional prayer with faith. But then the more elevated and real position will be, there is absolutely no separation between the person who you are so-called advising and yourself, and there's absolutely no difference between their source of mind and matter and life than your source of mind and matter and life. And that means then that seeing that in the other has to be established. And fortunately, we have an artistic capacity. We can use our imagination. We can use many, many different suggestions through icons or pilgrimages or inventive scenes and stories, forming pictures of what this divine might look like. For example, the incarnations, Jesus, Buddha, Ramakrishna, and so on, we have clear visual identities of these people, of these high manifested souls. And we can visualize and enhance the visualization with our thinking, or at least even make some kind of representative mental symbol. For example, internally in your heart, think of a light, think of a lamp, more brilliant than you have ever seen. And in the heart of that is a steady, steady point of light. And I can sink down deeply into that and enter into that pure being, and sit where it sits and beam. And as soon as I do that, all the egoistic problems have gone. And all the difficulties in front of me will have vanished totally. because I cannot have this awareness of this divinity and look at the world in the same way again. How will I establish this? Through practice. I have to repeat it over and over and over and over again until it becomes my second nature. That's what I have to do. And so that means establishing systematic routine, following the advice of a teacher specifically designed for you, that is cautious enough to understand where the areas of vulnerability might be, and then gradually, progressively, not urgently, reveal the truth bit by bit to the adherent. So we have to do several things before we enter our day. We have to assemble all the people around us that we're going to encounter, that we have encountered, that we're encountering now, and put them into the heavenly category of angels and saints and rishis and divine beings, and ultimately one source, there being all manifestations of that one supreme being, Satchidananda, and see that there is no world separate from it. It is the sense of a separate world that gives us this problem. So this is the principle of it, but the practice of it has to be done. We have to, while walking, while working, or as soon as we can get any kind of opportunity whatsoever, we have to insert this idea, Lord, you are here, Lord, you are here, or Mother, you are here, whatever is your chosen ideal. You are here, you are now. We are walking together, we're working together, we're talking together. And every encounter with a person is an encounter with God. That has to be our conviction. And we have to practice, and it should be a joyful practice. Imagine then you take every example, you deliberately, consciously do it. Every person you see, every person you encounter, you start off with, this is a person, an individual. I may like or dislike them, whatever it is. But one thing I know, that I can have a penetrating vision and see that entity without which matter and mind and life does not operate, is not manifest. So if you come back then to understanding in the language of the Tantric yogis, Shiva and Shakti, Shiva represents the absolute and Shakti represents the energetic manifesting active power which we call the world. And that doesn't work unless that pure being is there. And what then makes it manifest? It's called Nama Rupa Kriya. Name and form. Name means mind, mental movements. Without that, nothing exists. And form, that's matter. And life is energy. And we have to see the whole world has these three components. And what makes these three components? It's like a kind of screen that allows for separation, that allows for divisions, that allows for multiplicity in all kinds of directions, fragmentation, as it were. Now, if you have a view of this, you'll see it as dancing atoms, dancing waves, dancing points. That makes life very different, because it makes it like a play of waves, like going to the ocean and seeing the reflected sun in every single wave. It's like seeing the playing in the surf, if you will, playing in the waves that come and arrive on the shore, and enjoying and diving. And so if we're not enjoying, clearly anxiety is not enjoying, clearly disappointment is not enjoying, clearly depression is not enjoying, then we have to systematically change our way of thinking so that we revalue things in their proper context. and see that these are all divine manifested waves appearing before us, and the eyes that are catching it are also those waves, and the ears that are hearing it are also those waves. And this is why it is very useful to understand what is the structure of this material world. The structure of this material world is divided, as it were, into 5 types of waves. These are tanmatras, and they manifest and crystallize as the sensate world, picked up by the senses of tables and chairs and people and activities, bodies, our waking experience. In that context, we call these the Mahabhutas. There's a subtle version called tanmatras, subtle waves. And all of it comes from the cosmic mind. And philosophy provides us with another insight, which is essential to our understanding. And that is that whatever we experience here, we'll experience in the grand scheme of things in the whole cosmos. It's completely duplicated. That's an axiom we have to accept for the time being, so that we don't have to scratch our head what is going to happen in the cosmos, in the universe, or with other people even. What we're experiencing now is a miniature version of what is. This is why we have intelligence, because pure consciousness sits behind it. This is why we have joy and seek for joy, because bliss is our essential nature. And this is why we want to continue life, despite so-called difficulties, because existence is our fundamental nature. That's why we want to exist. You can't create this out of a vacuum. It is there to start with, and it unfolds. And we have to cultivate the art of seeing it in a proper context. Now, this seeing it in a proper context, and I've told many times before, is actually called discernment. It's called viveka. And this viveka, this discernment, leads one to detachment, vairagya. You see, if I see that everything is a divine play of waves, automatically I will be detached from 2 points of view. One is as a seer of the waves. And the second thing is, I see them in a different light, even if I engage in the waves. And when I engage fully in the play and in the fun, I certainly will not make an identification with them and therefore an attachment. But first of all, I have to see things in a correct light. I have to see it is God. God's playing with gods is Swami Vivekananda's wonderful, wonderful statement in his Jnana Yoga lectures. The real and apparent man. When gods play with gods, when people realize gods are playing with gods, at that point, the whole of mankind will be free. Imagine. Right now, we don't see it, but we work toward it. Now, we have so many opportunities to do it. We have a body capable of assisting us in this. We have a mind capable of assisting us within this. We have the capacity to steer attention in any direction we choose. We have free choice that enables us to consciously change our direction. And it requires determination, it requires dedication, it requires motivation. And when we reach rock bottom, then our motivation becomes strong because we want to clamber to the top. And so when people say, "Oh, I'm so depressed," well, welcome. Welcome to the start of your journey, because the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita begins with Arjun's despondency, his state of depression. We can't leave a person like that. We have to do what Krishna does. Go on, get up, do something. Engage in what we call occupational therapy, but add a profound dimension to it. What's that profound dimension? It is to see the worth in yourself and the worth in others as the fundamental Atman that is permanent, that never changes, that sits behind all the names and forms, but add something more. Even the names and forms are that. Even the names and forms are that. This is the in-between state of dualism and complete non-dualism. And the non-dualism says, even when this world goes away, this entity still exists. It did exist, if you want to frame it in time. It exists now, it will exist forever. It is eternal, it's unchangeable. That has to be so entrenched. And if it's true for me, it's true for everyone. Noticing that, there's no desire to change anybody. Because how will you change a God who sits behind there? Lord, you're full and free and perfect. You're not lame. You're not blind. You're not defective. You don't require any improvement. And if I give a small suggestion or something and you ignore it, that's okay. You're entitled to do that. You're the Lord of the universe. And from the human point of view, you have your right to learn and make your own errors and mistakes. Painful as they may be, nevertheless, how else will we learn? So we learn much more from pain than we do from joy and pleasure. And so be it, until a realization dawns. Knocking my head against this material world is not helping me. Running away from it is not helping me. Fighting it is not helping me. Resigning from it is not helping me. But I can tune myself into this present moment, and there I'll find multiple evidence of glory. Because everything I see, if I have an eye to see it, or hear or touch or taste, will be an element of divine glory everywhere. And if there's nothing outside, if the weather is bleak, and if the whole of life seems to be like a heavy storm against me, then I have to reevaluate and say, surely other people are in the storm. I'm not the only person there. And also a storm will pass. And there's a conviction. I am that. I'm that fundamental, immortal. Not only that, but from a theistic point of view, all the resources are there for my growth. Even in all of these situations, I can still admire a storm. I can still admire the drama of cloud accumulation. I can still praise the rainfall. You know, the Rig Veda, all the Vedas, but let's highlight the most ancient, the Rig Veda, is full of praise, wonderful songs to Agni, to this, to that, to the other, seeing all these things in nature. How does our devotion grow? It grows by assembling all the praises that we can imagine for our deity. For example, supposing we think that our God is the father or mother of the universe and our life. And when we sit down for japa or meditation, what will we do? Sit in the divine presence and think of all the glories we can to do with this deity. You are the one that lights the sun. You are the one that blows the winds. You are the one that moves my diaphragm up and down. You are the shining. You are the immortal. Your beauty is not exceeded by anyone else. Your love is not exceeded by anything else. Your generosity and abundance is always present. You beat my heart like a living drum that enables the blood to circulate everywhere. You exchange nutrients within the bloodstream everywhere. You provide fresh air for breath and the mechanism to deal with it. You provide healing at every given moment and replacement of cells. You alone are responsible for the inner city and its maintenance. You are responsible for digestion. You are the digester of all foods. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 7th chapter onwards, and I've assembled something called Divine Glories in English, you will see, and this is why we repeat it on retreats. So those who've been on a retreat will know how it goes. And there, at midday, we repeat the Divine Glories. You can make up your own. Your face shines like the sun. Your eyes are melt my soul with compassion and love. You have invested life in me because you have a purpose for me. You are the science of the self. You are the sun behind the sun. You spin all the worlds and galaxies. You sustain life. You present scenes for me, fresh, and opportunities to learn. You are knowledge itself. You are the ancient knower of all things. And so on like that, you see. And in doing these things, and that is why in many systems, you'll find 1,000 names for the divine. Every deity in Hinduism, for example, will have 1,000 names. 1,000 names of Ganesha, 1,000 names of Durga, let's say, Lakshmi, and so on. All of that. 1,000 names of Vishnu, Vishnu Sahasranama, 1,000 names for Shiva. So we have to, our devotion gets aroused when we start using these self-constructed 1,000 names with a depth of thankfulness and feeling. Not asking for anything, not begging, but simply responding, my heart responding to that love which is entered into me and which makes the heart beat in itself, which constructs the human body and the human framework in such a perfect way. That's why it's useful sometimes to study science and physics, because even the most hardened atheist will be filled with wonder as soon as he or she looks up into the sky or down into the sky. And we have the technology to expand the sense of wonder, adoration, and thankfulness also everywhere. So it's something that we can use. It is self-evident. Now, as soon as our mind is occupied in this way, it ceases to be occupied with ourselves and with our own small problems and difficulties, so-called. And when we revalue it, we say these are not problems and difficulties at all. No more than you would say that opposition players in a hockey game or a team sports would be a problem for me. It would be much easier if they were removed. And why is the goalpost so far away? Bring it closer, much closer, so when I kick, I can only kick a few yards and go straight in. And supply me with an audience that, without any opposition, I'm a champion player, and I can score goals easily because the goalpost is so near, and they're programmed to clap and cheer and so on. It's called artificial intelligence, I suppose. Well, what kind of game is that? Nobody would enjoy it. Not even the AI seats in the stadium would enjoy it. Right from the most ancient times, games for entertainment of the general citizenry have been available, often cruel. If you go to the Roman times, of course, very cruel. But nevertheless, this idea that we have to play because on the shores of Africa, probably, we had a long childhood and we learned to play in the sand and the waves. We learned to gather all the omega that is necessary for our intellectual growth. What a wonderful arrangement was there. So I have to ask then, Porrick, was your question in any way answered?
Indeed. And I think with reference to the Bhagavad Gita reminds me that it's an incredible source are an incredible resource when we reflect on matters that I suppose crop up in our day-to-day lives. This is a game, and when you remove ego and do your work to the best of your ability, understanding that ultimately it's not my work, that changes the perspective. But it's a case of reminding yourself of that at intervals during the day. So yeah.
So we have to take away a correcting kind of attitude, that things require correction.
Yeah.
See, God made the world and saw it was good. There's no reason for us to think of it as bad.
Yeah.
People are critical of other people. Well, there are no bad people. Bad behaviors, no doubt, but no bad people. Everyone is on a pilgrim journey, everyone we encounter. That's on the one hand, but the other hand, everyone is responsible for their own pilgrimage. You can have the best advice in the world, but actually each one is individually responsible. At the end of the day, we are born naked in the world, and naked we will die, and we're individually responsible in between. Having given a good start, the parental background for a child, for an upbringing, and so on. And I don't know of anybody who listens to these question and answer sessions who in any way is starving or incapacitated or in such pain that they need to be hospitalized. People have sufficient shelter, clothing. No one here is a refugee. Everyone is, largely speaking, everyone is working and living under the generous, radiant sun of divinity that sits inside and outside and around, and from its point of view, has no inside or outside. We have to continuously assert this. So, just to summarize, we have to go to Scripture for all our answers. Scripture meaning those records of the principles and the step-by-step practices which are there, and fully understand that and establish that, so that when things waver, we are sufficiently strong enough to say, wait, there's a principle that I can resort to, and the practical application of it, where I use my imagination and I use my creativity and I use my sense of immediate presence to feel this divinity with me, closer than breathing, present to the tips of the fingers. These are expressions from the Upanishads. Well, we'll leave it there. So, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thanks, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swami.